Let me talk about what I've learned, particularly in education, kind of my education on education. One of the first things I saw, and it was possibly some of the folks in the audience here that I was working with back 17 years ago, that you showed me the power of education data. You showed me that you could actually see. Now, I was integrating together data, not understanding necessarily exactly what you were going to do with it, but what I got to see was, okay, if you could pull together data about what was occurring outside of your classroom, and over time, you could do things with it that could help students. And you could do things that you wouldn't know to do without those data. So what I could see was even the most engaged teacher is very unlikely to know a lot of the things that you could learn from data. So for me, the realization was I'd seen the most important thing I would ever get a chance to do was to actually help on a big scale to help educators use data to help students, because I could see that it would work. Let me put that in context. I'd done work with Walmart and other retailers way back in the 1980s. And again, we were using data, and this was to serve their customers better. And the result is that they can put the right product on the right shelf for every customer that walks in the door. They can do it less expensively because they've got the right product. They're not inventorying the wrong product in there. So Walmart's got lower costs. And you get what you want. They make more money. You have lower prices. Everybody's happy. I'm proud of those things that I did. So we did good things. Now let's contrast that to education and what the opportunity is there. What I could see back in 1997 was I had an opportunity to make a difference. It's a small difference or a large difference, I don't know, but to make a difference in the education of millions of students. So when I compare that to the kind of work that we've done in other industries, there was no comparison. I knew that this was what I wanted to do with my life. So one of the things that we see, and we see this in lots of different fields, is every single customer that walks through the door, every individual is unique. And the objective is, how do we actually meet that uniqueness through data? Now, I always get a kick out of this. This is the kind of things that I've done. I get a kick when I actually see how it impacts me. So I'll just give you one story on this. When my son was born, it disrupted my wife's and my routine, in a lot of different ways. But one of the things it disrupted was our normal Saturday morning trip to the grocery store. So for weeks, we didn't go. Finally, we got ourselves a little more organized, and Saturday morning, we went off to the grocery store. One of the things that we would do is we'd pick up my wife's favorite breakfast, which happened to be, we'd pick up 6 containers of Dannon, no-fat, plain yogurt. I don't know how many of you get that. Apparently not very many. But every week, there were 6 containers right there. I'd take them off the shelf, put them in the cart. Well, I go that Saturday morning, and they're not there. In fact, there's not an open space like they forgot to stock the shelves or they were out of them. They were gone. Something else was in that space. And of course, I immediately knew what had happened. They looked at it and they said, okay, their inventory management system said, all right, we've got customers who buy 6 containers of this, and they're not here anymore, so we're not buying 6 containers. It just won't be there. And I felt, a little bummed, and it felt like I was kind of caught in my own trap. Oh, darn it, I built these kinds of systems. I know how they work, and this is what they do to me. And we took our groceries, and we checked out, we scanned our card, and we went home. And then the funny thing happened. The next Saturday morning, go back to the grocery store, there's 6 containers of Dannon non-fat plain yogurt there. I mean, their system, once we had scanned our card, it said, they're back. We know these people. These folks buy 6 containers of Dannon non-fat yogurt. Now, the reason I tell this is 17 years ago when my son was born. And grocery stores were personalizing themselves automatically for each individual customer that walked in the door. And today, you see in many of the things you encounter, personalization, whether you're using Netflix, Amazon, you name it. It's pervasive. So now let's consider education. The question is, can our education system be set up to meet the unique needs and the goals of each individual student? And I'm going to argue not only that it can, but that it's being done now, in districts across the country. It can be done at scale, and that's what we have set out to do in eScholar. Because if we can do that, the impact will be dramatic. So let me explain to you why. Now let's just think about education. We talked about yogurt, having 6 containers of exactly the yogurt we wanted. Okay, that's great and that's wonderful and it improves my life a little bit. But think about what education does. I mean, education is the thing that gave me the ability to go from being living in a trailer on a farm in eastern Kentucky to being here. The impact can be huge. It's very, very different than let's make sure I've got the right product on the shelf for the right customer. This is what eScholar is focused on, is creating those kinds of opportunities for millions of students. So let's think about it. Why is this difficult to do in education? As I mentioned, in every other field that I've been involved in, we've used data to serve customers and end users. In education, when we pulled data together, remember we started doing this almost 20 years ago. Still today, most of those data are used for accountability reports, and they're put in the hands of the people running the education system. And I'm not saying that that's bad. I mean, that's good. That's a good, worthwhile thing to do. Value comes out of it. But the real value comes from putting data in the hands of educators right on the ground, right where they're working with students in a way that they can use those data to help. The situation is changing. If you go back a few years, what that meant, putting data in your hands as educators, people did it. They did it 17 years ago, and they're doing it today. But one of the things that's changed is user interfaces. It used to be, we put data in your hand and go, okay, learn this tool. You can drag and drop these things and create the report that you want. Well, that required that you got training, learned how not to double count things. Today you don't have to be an Excel guru or an expert on how to drag and drop the right information so you get the right answer. There are interfaces that can actually show you the data that you need right now to help students. For a moment, let me just give you a parallel in the healthcare industry. So one of the arguments you might have about, here's why I don't use data, I'm really busy as a teacher. We understand that. I know that's a fact. Okay, healthcare professionals are really busy as well. And that's probably one of the reasons that we didn't see a very fast uptake of the use of data in healthcare for a long time. Because the idea of handing them a tool where they could create their own report from scratch didn't work. They just didn't have time for it. Okay, but what's happened in that field, and you've probably seen it when you've been to the doctor's office, is, okay, now they have systems where the user interface is designed to be exactly what the healthcare professional needs right now to do their job. They have their accountability reports. They count up the number of bypass surgeries that they do and the utilization of all the beds in the hospital and all kinds of things like that. But now what's really changing the quality of care is they can actually put the relevant information about your medical history, all of those things right there in the hands of the caregiver right now when they're doing something to help you. What we found with healthcare, and we've seen the same thing in education, is I need what I need right now so I can use it. I need it now or never. I don't need to spend 10 minutes trying to put together the right report for it. So those are things that are changing our ability to use data and technology to help students. And so we're seeing the same kinds of things happening now in education because the user interfaces have gotten better, the systems have gotten better, and you don't have to drag and drop and build your own report. But one of the things we still see is we still see a limited impact from the use of data and technology across education. And a few years ago, we started asking ourselves, why is that? Technology's gotten better. We've gotten more comprehensive data, and we're getting more usage. It continues to grow. We're doing something valuable, but what's it really going to take for this to break through and be something that's really going to change education and improve it? One of the things we decided to do is we decided to go out and talk to students, parents, and teachers and really ask them, okay, what are the things that we could do to help? What are the things that you find challenging in education and the things that you would like to see change? And before I tell you what we found when we went and asked them, I'd like to ask you a few questions. One, I want to ask you, how many of you, so you're welcome to raise your hands here on this, I'd really like to know, how many of you got into education because what you wanted to do was help students achieve the best with their life? I've got to see more hands than that. I know there are more hands than that. Okay, that's a lot of hands. That's good. All right. There's another question. How many of you believe that the best of your life is different for each individual student? Okay. A lot of the same hands. Not every single one of the same hands, but a lot of them. All right, here's the third question. How many of you believe that our education system is set up and organized to focus on each individual student achieving the best with their life? I don't see any hands. So I appreciate the feedback. I've asked this question a number of times. This is what we need to change, and we can. And I'll tell you, it is changing. And until we change this, the impact of all of these things that we're doing, data, technology, personal devices, all that kind of stuff, will continue to be limited. But what we need to do is take data and technology and use those in a way that allows educators to do what they're passionate about and what they do best, which is help each individual student succeed with their lives. Now, I know that a lot of you do that today, probably all of you. But I would argue that you do it despite the system and not because of it.